All right, copper nerds, this one's going to be really informal. I would like to talk just a little bit about die progressions, I guess, die pairings, and why there are so many varieties, particularly in the early copper years. The dies themselves didn't last very long in those early years. The dies would crack after some tens of thousands of uses, as opposed to hundreds of thousands of uses towards the end of the large cent runs. And what we would see is that as the dies would start cracking and falling apart, they would be repaired or paired up with the next succeeding die. And I'm just going cold on this. This is Chuck Heck's book. I'm just going to find a good example of some die progressions. Let's look at like a 35 maybe. Of course, Chuck's book is, I think, in the deployment sequence, not necessarily in Sheldon order, but here we are. Okay. So your Sheldon 35 started off with an unbroken die. And it was paired up with, let's see, the reverse die that was left over from Sheldon 34, right? And then as that die progressed, you got this north to south bisecting crack that developed and continued to develop until it was just a massively broken die. And then they would retire that obverse die and then typically bring in a fresh obverse die. And if the reverse die was still alive and kicking, then they would just keep running that with a new reverse die, which would create a new variety. So I've pulled out just some of the cents that I have in sequence. I have like Sheldon 49 through 60. I just happen to have them all. And we'll just use my Powers book to guide us. But our 49 has got obverse 21, which was used on 47 and 48. And then it's paired up with a new reverse die, which is reverse die X, and it's the closed wreath variety. The top of the wreath is closed. And then I always notice that the right ribbon tail is crowded up against the fraction. So this die creates or has a break appear through the E and is used for a while and eventually retired. I don't know how far that progresses. Sheldon 49, page 133. It's something I'm still trying to wrap my head around, is just how long a die was used in these early days before it was retired. Some of them break catastrophically, some don't ever appear to break. So Sheldon 49 starts out unbroken, then we get a moderate break and then a fairly heavy break. So they must have retired the die just when it started getting ugly. And a lot of these, I think all of these dies they wouldn't last a full day. So they're striking coins, just hammering away. And at some point, they'd be like, oh, this die is trashed. And then they would switch it out with another. So this reverse die would continue on for the Sheldon 50. So we're still using the same reverse die, but we have this new obverse die. And they would hammer through those. A break doesn't appear on 50 that I'm aware of. So I don't know why that die was retired, but it was. Then comes 51. This is unbroken, but it does pick up a break here. They retire that die. This reverse die, still alive and kicking. Then we go to 52 with that same reverse die. 52, it looks like, picks up a break through the cap, but nothing catastrophic. It gets retired. Along comes 53. Oops, there's our obverse on 53 with that same reverse. Then we're going to get to 54. And 54 picks up a crack here under the cap. And it's the last deployment of this closed wreath reverse. So then we get to Sheldon 55, which has a little more progressed crack. And then yet another new reverse. This reverse is only used on 55. So this reverse fails at some point or is retired. Then we get 56 with the famous office boy reverse. And that crack gets even more developed. And I don't think you're gonna, through the capsule and with, yeah, there it is. You see it? So that eventually results in this obverse that was used for 3 deployments. It ends up being retired, and that office boy reverse was a single-use reverse. Then we get Sheldon 57, and this is a single-use obverse and reverse. So it's one that you can do diagnostics on, even if one side of the coin is slick or damaged. If you had a slick reverse and this obverse die, you wouldn't know if it was a 54, 5, or 6. But 57, single-use front and back. Then we get into 58, where again that obverse and reverse are new for the 58, but then the obverse die is retired, and then the 59 die comes in, and then it picks up a crack through the fraction bar, which yeah, you can see it. It runs boop through the fraction bar to the right of 1, and then over through the A. So then those are both retired, and 60 comes about, and then this is a single-use reverse again. Kind of an ugly one. What's wrong with it? Let's look it up in Hex book. Such an informal video, guys. I'm almost embarrassed to put it out there, but sometimes it's fun to just chat. I didn't put a lot of thought into this. More just conceptually wanted to talk about die deployments and pairings, and just the short life of the dies and why we have so many varieties in 1794. So that reverse on 60, it actually looks fine here. Okay. So that's some really heavy clash marks is what we see going on there. That's the hair clash marks, and that's the cap. In fact, if you want to see something really cool, let's do that since we're in here. Sheldon 32 has some of the coolest clash marks. I have a couple 32s, but none that have impressive clash marks. You're going to see this cap imprinted on the reverse like 7 times distinctly. There it is. So you can see one moving from, stick my hand in there, but like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, at least 6. But I think that we're told there's a 7th with the cud. Okay. So the internal cud on S, what are we talking? 7th cap clash, counterclockwise, furthest to the left. Oh, I see, it's right there. I didn't even count it. Yeah, that's a cool one. Anyway, so in 1794, your dies just didn't last that long. We had just under 1 million struck, and there's 58 collectible varieties and another 11 or 12 NCs. 11 NCs, so 69 total, and under 1 million. Oh, I can't do math right now. I would do the math on my phone, but maybe I'll do it later and put it in the description. But the die life was short. Again, by the time we got much later into the middle and late dates, we were getting hundreds of thousands of strikes. Somewhere in this book, there's some really interesting info about die life, and I think I'll be able to find it fairly quickly. Here we go. Really interesting stuff. So, starting in 1793, when the mint started, about 3,000 strikes. So when we were doing chain sense, they were getting about 3,000 strikes out of a die before it would fail. And then we're getting up to 10,000 towards the end of the year, 20,000 on average for 1794. So by the time we get to 1857, we're talking 400,000 strikes per die. And if we had that die tech back in 1794, we would have expected about 2.5 obverse and reverse dies to strike all million or so. So we'd have probably like 4 or 5 different varieties instead of the 69 total varieties that we have. And we also wouldn't have all those cool diagnostics from the die breaks. So I'm glad that the die tech kind of sucked early at the mint. Yeah, this guy Voigt came in. Oh, Eckfeld, is Adam Eckfeld, who improved the forging method. So as I understand it, they would create the die, then they would anneal it to soften it, and then they would use the hub to impress, and the hub just looked like a coin. It was in relief. It was carved in relief like the coin was. And then that would be hardened, tempered to harden it. Then they would have the new die, which would be annealed to be soft, and they would press that hub into the face of the die, which would put in your face and bust, basically. And then they would take that soft die and they would punch in all of the edge device, the letter devices, the date and whatnot, and then they would engrave the hair detail. I believe the cap was part of the hub also. That's where you get all of your individual, where each individual die had unique hair details, letter spacing, and things like that, because that was all engraved by hand. And then the die would be tempered and then used to strike planchets. And the die steel was not great. You would have a lot of die failures, be they cracks, cuts, and sinking. I don't know how none of these have any real massive cracks. Let me just grab, maybe a 32 and a 62. And here. So we would get these great failures, like that big ol' advanced crack on my 32, which is a little rough. I don't see any clash marks on this one. Or we'd get our cuds, and both, like on this one. But large cents were just struck in real high quantities because they needed a lot of copper for commerce. The die steel sucked. And in 1794, you just got all these varieties because the dies just would repeatedly fail. And one would fail, they'd pull it out and put a fresh one on. And then each time you had any change in die pairings, you get a new variety. Even though this one is just, these dies were used on the 57 just once. These were both retired at the same time. When they went to 58, they deployed 2 fresh dies. Where's my 58? There it is. It's actually the first 1794 I got was this 58. I got it on eBay at auction for a couple $100 and got it in my hands and just loved that lettered edge, and it got me digging into them a little further. And then, if you follow my channel, you know what's happened to me from there. I'm just really into them. But I guess the purpose of this video is just to sort of casually discuss the how the die deployments worked and why we have so many varieties, and what it takes to have a variety is just any change in the die pairings. But you can follow through. So you're looking at your heads of 93. That's a unique obverse. The reverse carries on. These two have the same obverse. You get the droopy stem reverse that carries through the 20, and that same reverse carries through to the 21, which is the flat pole. Both are replaced, so you've got the 22, which has single-use dies front and back, and then they have fresh dies again for 23, but this one fails, so they bring in a new one at 24. Then they just get rid of both. Then we have fresh dies here, and then this reverse is retired. This carries down to a new reverse, which cracks. 26 has a big old break in it. Well, E, and then a big one through S. And then we get fresh dies again for 27. And then the obverse is retired. We've got 28. This 28 carries over to a new reverse with that long right ribbon tail, which stays as a new pairing comes in for 30. That's got the double lock. And then 31 is also double lock, but it's not the same die. So fresh dies again, single use on 31. 32 is fresh dyes again. This obverse that has the cud gets used on 32, then it gets used on the wheel spoke, and then it gets used on the 34, which then brings in a single berry reverse that gets a couple of uses. Big crack on 35, so it's retired. They both are. Then we get fresh dyes again for 36. And then a new obverse, but still this second single berry reverse. There's two different single berry reverses. This one carries through for 36 with a new obverse for 37, with a new obverse for 38. And then this obverse, the marred field obverse, carries through for 39 with a different unique reverse, which then picks up a crack down here. Anyway, you can kind of see just how they're retiring one die and keeping the other one rolling. You know, a new reverse die gets paired here with this obverse die. Finally gets retired, come down to 41. We've got a fresh pair. Of course, this cracks right away. Moves on to 42 with a new reverse. And then the obverse die is retired. They keep this one in place. Slap in our 43 obverse. So on and so forth. Oh, 43 picks up a really cool crack towards the end. I have an early die state 43, but I'd love to get a late one. But that's just kind of how it works. I assume everyone already knew that. This video is not all that important, I guess, but just kind of neat to think about how those dies were used and deployed. And I just get a kick out of that reverse X, that closed wreath segment, where this one, this one, this one, this one, that one, and that one, they all have the same reverse die, which seems crazy that you'd go through 6 obverse dies for one reverse die. That was probably just incidentally a very well-produced reverse die, because it never does break, to my knowledge. I think that's where I'm going to put a pin in it. I do want to get into this topic in a little more organized fashion and a little more detail, but I thought we'd just casually chat about it for now, and I'll do a little more research. I mean, you heard a lot of the stuff I was just kind of guessing and yammering on about, but I appreciate you guys tuning in. Been having fun. I hope you guys have been having an all right time following my weird little copper channel, and I'll start working on some more organized content. That is my goal. As the channel grows, I'm going to try and get a little better at what it is that I'm doing here, but for now it's amateur hour because I'm kind of the only show in town for early copper on YouTube, but I promise I'll get better. I'll try. Thanks again for tuning in. You don't even have to subscribe, but if you want to, have at it. And I will certainly look forward to catching you on the next one, and I'll see you in the comments.